The burlap sack tore against her bare feet as Amelia Cordova stumbled through the darkness, her lungs burning with every ragged breath, knowing that if they caught her this time, the contract owner would make certain she never saw another dawn. The Arizona night stretched endlessly before her, the moon a sliver of silver that barely illuminated the rocky terrain between her and freedom. She had waited 3 years for this moment, 3 years of serving the Hendersons in their sprawling ranch house outside Tucson, bound by a contract her dead father had signed when debts crushed him under their weight. The paper had passed from his creditors to the Hendersons, and with it, her life had become something less than human, something owned. Her thin cotton dress, the only one she possessed, clung to her body with sweat despite the October chill. She had no food, no water, no possessions, except the clothes on her back and the desperate hope that distance would equal safety. Behind her, she imagined she could hear dogs, though perhaps it was only the wind howling through the saguaro cacti that dotted the landscape like sentinels. Amelia had been 19 when the contract began. Now, at 22, she understood that waiting for her term to end naturally was foolish. The Hendersons had already extended it twice, claiming damages for broken dishes, for imagined thefts, for the cost of feeding her their table scraps. The contract that should have ended in months would stretch into years, then decades, then forever. So she ran. Her feet bled. She could feel the warm trickle between her toes, the sting of each stone that bit into her flesh. But she did not stop, could not stop. The foreman, a cruel man named Butch Thornton, had made his intentions clear that afternoon. The way he had cornered her in the root cellar, his hands grabbing, his breath reeking of whiskey. She had escaped by smashing a jar of preserves against his temple, and in that moment of his stunned rage, she knew her time had run out. The landscape began to shift as exhaustion clawed at her. Rolling hills gave way to flatter ground, and in the distance she could make out the faint shapes of buildings. Wilcox, perhaps, or one of the smaller settlements that peppered southern Arizona. The year was 1883, and the territory still held the wildness that gave it its reputation, but it also held the promise of anonymity, of losing herself among strangers who would not know her face or her bondage. Dawn crept across the sky in shades of pink and gold as Amelia finally collapsed. Her body simply gave out, folding onto the hard-packed earth beside what appeared to be a narrow cattle trail. She tried to rise, but her legs refused to obey. Her throat was so parched she could not even swallow. 3 miles, maybe 5, she had covered during the night. Not enough, never enough. The sound of hoofbeats filtered through her fading consciousness. She wanted to hide, to crawl into the sparse brush and disappear, but movement was beyond her now. All she could do was close her eyes and pray that whoever approached would have mercy, or at least make her death quick. "Holy hell!" a deep voice said, and she felt the vibration of boots hitting the ground near her head. Strong hands rolled her gently onto her back. Amelia forced her eyes open and found herself staring up at a man who blocked out the rising sun. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a weather-worn face that spoke of years under the brutal Arizona sky. Dark hair fell across his forehead beneath a dusty brown hat, and his eyes, the color of creek water, widened as they took in her condition. Miss, can you hear me?" His voice carried genuine concern, not the false kindness she had learned to fear. She tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and the man moved with swift efficiency. He retrieved a canteen from his horse, a sturdy paint that waited patiently nearby, and supported her head with one calloused hand, while bringing the water to her mouth with the other. "Slow now," he cautioned. "Just small sips." The water was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. It took all her willpower not to gulp it down, to let him control the flow as he had instructed. After several small drinks, her throat loosened enough for words. "They will come," she whispered. "Please do not let them take me." His jaw tightened. "Who's coming?" "The Hendersons. They're men." Her hand clutched at his shirt, fingers desperate. "Please, He studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn feet, her threadbare dress, the bruises that mottled her arms in the shape of grabbing fingers. Something hard settled in his expression. "Nobody's taking you anywhere you do not want to go," he said firmly. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though she was not certain it was true. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, settling her gently onto his horse before swinging up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her steady against his chest, and she felt the overwhelming urge to weep at this simple kindness. "Name's Zachary Kane," he said, turning the horse eastward. "My ranch is about 2 miles from here. You will be safe there." "Amelia," she managed. "Amelia Cordova." He nodded once, as if committing it to memory, and urged his horse into a careful trot that would not jostle her too severely. The Kane Ranch, when they reached it, was modest, but well maintained. A single-story house built of adobe sat surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals holding perhaps 24 horses, and endless stretches of fenced pasture. It was not the sprawling empire of the Henderson spread, but it had a lived-in quality, a sense of honest work rather than exploitation. Zachary carried her inside, calling out as he entered, "Rosa, need your help." An older Mexican woman appeared from what Amelia assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes went wide at the sight of Amelia's condition. "Dios mío," Rosa breathed. "What happened to this poor girl?" "Found her collapsed on the south trail," Zachary explained, laying Amelia carefully on a well-worn sofa. "She is running from someone." "Henderson's," she said. Rosa's expression darkened. "That family." She spat the words like a curse. "Always thinking they own the world and everyone in it. Come, child, let me see to those feet." Amelia wanted to protest that she was fine, that she had already imposed too much, but exhaustion swallowed her objections. She let Rosa tend to her wounds with gentle, experienced hands while Zachary disappeared into another room. He returned with a folded piece of paper, which he set on the side table without comment. Rosa worked in silence, cleaning and bandaging Amelia's feet, bringing her more water and a bowl of warm broth that she insisted Amelia drink slowly. "You need rest," Rosa said firmly. "The guest room is ready. Zachary, help her." He lifted her again, and Amelia felt embarrassment flush through her exhaustion. She was not accustomed to being helped, to being treated as though she mattered. The guest room was small but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out over the eastern pastures. "Sleep," Zachary said. "We will talk when you are stronger." But as he turned to leave, Amelia found her voice. "Why are you helping me?" He paused in the doorway, looking back at her with those steady creek water eyes. "Because you needed help. Is that not reason enough?" The question hung in the air long after he had gone, after Rosa had helped her into a clean nightgown, after the door had closed and silence had settled over the room. Amelia stared at the ceiling, waiting for the inevitable moment when kindness would reveal its price. But exhaustion pulled her under before doubt could take full root. She woke to darkness and the smell of cooking meat. For a panicked moment, she thought she was back in the Henderson kitchen, that her escape had been a dream, but then memory returned, and with it the soft comfort of clean sheets and the absence of fear. Someone had left a lamp burning low on the dresser. By its light, she could see a simple cotton dress laid across a chair, with undergarments and a pair of worn but serviceable boots beneath it. Her feet throbbed, but the pain was manageable, the wounds cleaned and properly dressed. She rose slowly, testing her weight. Her body ached in a dozen places, muscles protesting the night's desperate flight, but she was alive and, for the moment, safe. The dress fit reasonably well, if a bit loose in the shoulders. It had probably belonged to Rosa in her younger days. Voices drifted from the main room, low and serious. Amelia made her way toward them, moving carefully on her injured feet. Zachary sat at a rough-hewn table with another man, this one older, with silver threading through his dark hair and a marshal's star pinned to his vest. They both looked up as she appeared in the doorway. "Miss Cordova," the marshal said, rising. I am Marshal Tom Redding. Zachary here asked me to come by. Thought you might need some legal counsel. Amelia's stomach dropped. I have done nothing wrong. I know that, Marshal Redding said gently. But running from a contract, even an unjust one, can bring trouble. Zachary showed me the paper he found in your dress pocket. She had forgotten about the contract. She had stolen it from Henderson's office 3 nights ago, waiting for her moment. Without it, they would have to produce another copy, and she had hoped the delay might give her time to get far enough away that pursuit would not be worth the effort. Zachary gestured to the chair beside him. Sit, please. She did, though her hands twisted nervously in her lap. The marshal spread the contract on the table, and Amelia stared at the hateful thing, at her father's shaky signature and the terms that had bound her like chains. This type of debt servitude, Marshal Redding said carefully, exists in a legal gray area. The Hendersons would argue they have a right to your labor until the debt is satisfied. However, the extensions they have added, these penalty clauses, they are of questionable legitimacy. What does that mean for Amelia? Zachary asked, his voice tight. It means that if the Hendersons come looking, they might have enough legal standing to force her return, at least until a judge can review the matter, and getting a judge to review it could take months, maybe longer. Amelia felt the walls closing in. Then I will run again. I will not go back. There is another option, Zachary said. He looked at Marshal Redding. Tell her. The marshal nodded. If the contract holder willingly releases you, burns the contract and signs a statement of release, you would be free. No legal recourse. The Hendersons will never agree to that, Amelia said bitterly. No, Zachary agreed. They would not. He stood and walked to the fireplace, taking the contract from the table. Amelia watched in confusion as he held the paper to the flames, watched as fire caught and consumed the words that had defined her life for 3 years. What are you doing? She gasped. Making sure they cannot use this against you, Zachary said calmly, watching the paper blacken and curl. And if they come here, I will swear that you have been working for me, that I paid the debt to them directly and the contract was satisfied. Marshal Redding here will back my statement. Marshal Redding cleared his throat. Now, I did not say I would lie to the Hendersons. You would not be lying, Zachary said, because as of this moment, Amelia works for me. I am paying her a fair wage, and she is free to leave whenever she chooses. Is that not right, Miss Cordova? Amelia stared at him, unable to process what was happening. I do not understand. Zachary returned to the table, his expression serious. I need help on the ranch. Rosa does what she can, but she is getting older, and there is more work than I can manage alone. You need safety and a way to earn your keep. This serves us both. You will have a room, food, and wages. No contract, no bondage. You work because you choose to, and you leave whenever you choose to. That is the deal. But the Hendersons will have no proof of anything except my word against theirs, Zachary finished. And without that paper, their case becomes much weaker. It is not perfect, but it is a start. Marshal Redding stood, settling his hat on his head. For what it is worth, Miss Cordova, Zachary Kane is one of the most honest men I know. If he says you are free, then in my eyes you are free. The Hendersons want to make trouble. They can take it up with the territorial court, and I will be happy to testify about the questionable nature of their contract extensions. After the marshal left, Amelia sat in stunned silence. Rosa brought food, a plate of beef and beans that smelled like heaven, and Amelia ate slowly, aware of Zachary watching her from across the table. Why? She finally asked. You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. He was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. 3 years ago, my younger sister got herself into trouble. She was 17, foolish, and she signed a contract to work in a saloon in Tombstone, thinking it was just serving drinks and cleaning. By the time I found her, she had been there 6 months, and the things they had done to her. He stopped, jaw working. I got her out, but I had to pay 3 times what the contract was worth. And even then, the owner only agreed because I had friends who made it clear what would happen if he refused. My sister never recovered. She lives in California now with my aunt, but she is not the same girl she was. Understanding dawned. You see her in me. I see someone who needed help, Zachary corrected. Same as she did. Same as anyone would in your situation. This country is supposed to be about freedom, about opportunity. Contracts like yours, they are just slavery by another name. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I will work hard, I promise. I know you will, he said. But for tonight, just rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to start. The next days fell into a rhythm that Amelia had never experienced. She woke with the sun, helped Rosa prepare breakfast, and then spent her mornings learning the work of the ranch. Zachary raised horses primarily, breeding and training them for sale to ranchers and the army. It was work that required patience and skill, and he approached it with a quiet competence that Amelia found herself admiring. He taught her how to handle the horses, how to read their moods, and earn their trust. Her feet healed slowly, the bandages coming off after a week to reveal angry scars that would never fully fade. But they held her weight, and that was enough. Rosa taught her cooking beyond the basic survival skills she had learned at the Hendersons. Real cooking with spices and care, creating meals that brought satisfaction rather than just sustenance. In the evenings, after the work was done, the three of them would sit on the porch and watch the sun paint the sky in impossible colors, while Rosa told stories of her youth in Sonora, and Zachary quietly whittled pieces of wood into shapes that gradually resolved into horses, birds, and once, a small woman with her hand outstretched to touch a horse's nose. Is that supposed to be me? Amelia asked, taking the carving from him. He shrugged, but there was a hint of color in his cheeks. Maybe. 2 weeks after her arrival, riders appeared on the horizon. Amelia saw them from the corral, where she was working with a young mare, and her blood turned to ice. Zachary, she called, trying to keep her voice steady. He was at her side in moments, following her gaze. 4 riders, moving at a purposeful pace toward the ranch. Even from a distance, she recognized the lead horse, a big bay gelding that belonged to Robert Henderson himself. Get in the house, Zachary said quietly. Stay with Rosa. No. Amelia's hands clenched on the fence rail. I will not hide. He looked at her, something fierce and protective flashing in his eyes. You do not have to face them. Yes, I do. She met his gaze steadily. If I hide, they win. Even if I stay free, they win. I need to face them. Zachary studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Then we face them together. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. Robert Henderson was a thick-set man in his 50s, with a florid face and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Beside him sat his foreman, Butch Thornton, a bandage still visible on his temple where Amelia had struck him. The other 2 were ranch hands she recognized but could not name. Kane, Henderson said, not bothering with pleasantries. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Cannot say that I do, Zachary replied, his voice mild, but his posture tense. Everything on this ranch is mine or freely working for me. Henderson's gaze found Amelia, and his expression hardened. That girl is bound to me by legal contract. She is a thief and a runaway, and I am here to collect what is mine. Amelia Cordova works for me, Zachary said. Has been for near 3 weeks now. I paid her debt to you direct, and the contract was satisfied. That is a lie, Thornton spat. We never received a cent from you. Then perhaps you should check with your employer about where his money goes, Zachary said coolly. Not my concern if Henderson did not tell you about our transaction. Henderson's face went a deeper shade of red. There was no transaction. That girl ran, and I want her back. Show me the contract, Zachary said. What? The contract. You claim she's bound to you. Show me the paperwork. Henderson's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He clearly had not expected this challenge. The contract is at my ranch, but that does not change the facts. It changes everything, Marshal Redding said, riding up from the direction of town. Amelia had not seen him approach, but his timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Zachary must have sent word when the riders were spotted. Marshal, Henderson said, trying for cordiality and failing. This is a private matter. Contract disputes fall under my jurisdiction, the marshal said. And from what I understand, you are claiming breach of contract without being able to produce the actual contract. That makes this my business. The girl has the contract, Thornton said suddenly. She stole it when she ran. Did she? Marshal Redding looked at Amelia. Miss Cordova, do you have Mr. Henderson's contract? No, sir, Amelia said, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heart. Mr. Kane paid my debt, and the contract was satisfied and destroyed, as is proper when a debt is cleared. You lying little... Thornton started, but Zachary moved faster than Amelia would have thought possible for a man his size. His hand clamped on Thornton's saddle horn, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and absolutely deadly. Finish that sentence, and you will be eating through a straw for a month. Thornton subsided, but his glare promised violence. Henderson tried a different approach. Kane, be reasonable. I have money invested in that girl, 3 years of feeding and housing her. You cannot expect me to just write that off. I can, and I do, Zachary said, especially when your investment included extending a contract illegally and allowing your foreman to assault her. That is a serious accusation, Henderson blustered. Look at her arms, Zachary said flatly. The bruises are still visible, or should we have Doc Morrison come out and document them officially? Henderson's bluster faded. He looked at Amelia, really looked at her, and she saw the moment he decided she was not worth the trouble. Whatever calculation he was running, it came down on the side of cutting his losses. This is not over, Henderson said, but the words lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Marshal Redding said. I strongly suggest you ride back to your ranch, Mr. Henderson, and forget you ever had a contract with Miss Cordova. Because if I hear about you causing trouble, I will start investigating all your business dealings, including those contract extensions and where exactly your workers come from. I imagine I might find some interesting irregularities. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Henderson's jaw worked, but after a long moment, he jerked his head toward his men and wheeled his horse around. They rode off at a gallop, dust marking their retreat. Amelia's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the ground, shaking with reaction. Zachary knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. It is over, he said. They will not be back. How can you be sure? Because Henderson is a bully, and bullies only fight when they think they can win, Marshal Redding said, dismounting. You have witnesses, you have me on your side, and most importantly, you have Zachary Kane, who is respected in this territory. Henderson knows he lost this one. Amelia looked up at Zachary, at the concern etched in his weathered face, and felt something shift in her chest. This man who had every reason to turn away from her problems had instead stood between her and harm, had lied for her, had burned her contract, had faced down men who would think nothing of violence to get what they wanted. Thank you, she said, knowing the words were inadequate, but unable to find better ones. No need for thanks, he said, helping her to her feet. You are part of this ranch now. We take care of our own. But the way he looked at her, the way his hand lingered on her arm just a moment longer than necessary, suggested that perhaps she was becoming something more than just a ranch hand. The weeks turned into months. Autumn gave way to winter. Though winter in southern Arizona was mild compared to the brutal seasons Amelia remembered from her childhood in Colorado. She settled into the rhythm of ranch life, her body growing stronger, her skills more refined. The horses responded to her with increasing trust, and Zachary often remarked on her natural way with them. They worked side by side most days, and in the close quarters of the barn and corrals, Amelia found herself noticing things about him. The way his hands, so large and calloused, could be infinitely gentle when handling a skittish foal. The way he hummed tunelessly when he thought no one was listening. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which he did more often as the weeks passed. She noticed, too, the way he looked at her. Not with the predatory hunger that had made her sick with fear at the Hendersons, but with something else, something that made her heart beat faster and her skin feel warm even in the cool morning air. Rosa noticed, too, if her knowing looks and pointed comments were any indication, that man has not looked at a woman like that since Sarah Miller broke his heart 5 years ago, Rosa said one afternoon while they were preparing dinner. I do not know what you mean, Amelia said, focusing intently on the vegetables she was chopping. Rosa's tone made clear what she thought of that denial. You are both young, both alone, both too stubborn to say what you feel. Someone will have to make the first move. Rosa, he saved me. He gave me a home and work and safety. I will not repay that by making things awkward with unwanted attention. Who says it would be unwanted? Amelia had no answer for that. Christmas came, and with it, a surprise. Zachary took a wagon into Wilcox and returned with packages that he distributed with the air of a man unused to such gestures. For Rosa, a beautiful wool shawl in deep blue. For Amelia, a pair of leather gloves perfectly sized for her hands, and a book, a collection of poems by Walt Whitman. I noticed you reading Rosa's magazines, Zachary said, as Amelia stared at the gifts in wonder. Thought you might like something of your own. I cannot accept this, Amelia said, though her fingers traced the embossed cover with longing. It is too much. It is a Christmas gift, Zachary said firmly. And you can accept it, or I will be insulted. She laughed, the sound still feeling strange and new even after months of freedom. Well, we cannot have that. That evening, after Rosa had retired and the house was quiet, Amelia found Zachary on the porch, staring out at the starlit landscape. May I join you? She asked. He gestured to the chair beside him. Always. They sat in comfortable silence for a time. Amelia had brought the book of poems with her, and she ran her fingers over the cover, building courage. I want to tell you something, she said finally. When I ran from the Hendersons, I thought I was running toward freedom, toward the chance to just exist without someone owning me. But what I found here, it is more than that. It is more than I ever imagined could exist. Zachary turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. You gave me back my life, Amelia continued, her voice soft but steady. You gave me dignity and choice and the knowledge that there are good people in this world. I will never be able to repay that. You do not owe me anything, Zachary said. I have told you that. I know, but I want you to understand what it means to me, what you mean to me. She took a breath. I care about you, Zachary, more than is probably wise, more than I have any right to, but there it is. The silence stretched between them, and Amelia felt her courage begin to fail. She had misread the situation, had mistaken kindness for something deeper, and now she had ruined everything. Then Zachary reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against hers, his grip gentle but sure. I have been trying to figure out how to say something similar, he admitted. Kept telling myself it was too soon, that you needed time to heal, that I was taking advantage of the situation. But the truth is, Amelia, I have not felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Maybe never, if I am being honest. You have this strength in you, this fire that survived everything they tried to do to put it out. You are remarkable, and I would very much like to court you properly, if you would allow it. Joy bloomed in Amelia's chest, so sudden and intense it almost hurt. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. He squeezed her hand, And in that simple gesture, Amelia felt the promise of everything she had thought lost forever: hope, future, love. The courting, as Zachary called it, was a sweet and careful thing. He treated her with a respect that still made her marvel, always asking before touching, always ensuring she was comfortable. They took walks in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about the long drive that had brought his family to Arizona when he was 15, about his parents who had died in a fever outbreak 7 years ago, leaving him the ranch and a responsibility he had shouldered with quiet determination. She told him about her own past, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had been a good man brought low by bad luck and worse decisions, about the moment she had signed the contract, believing she was honoring her father's memory by paying his debts, not understanding what she was truly agreeing to. "I was so naive," she said one evening, as they sat by the creek that marked the eastern boundary of his property. "I thought if I worked hard and kept my head down, it would be fine. I did not realize that some people see kindness as weakness, that they would take and take until there was nothing left." "That is not naivete," Zachary said. "That is faith in basic human decency. The fact that the Hendersons violated that faith says everything about them and nothing about you." She leaned against his shoulder, and his arm came around her, solid and safe. They sat like that until the stars emerged, watching the water flow past, constant and inevitable as time itself. Spring brought new foals and the promise of good sales. Zachary's reputation as a horse breeder was growing, and buyers came from as far as Texas to look at his stock. Amelia found herself handling many of the negotiations, her way with the horses making it easy to demonstrate their qualities. More than one buyer commented on what a fine partnership she and Zachary made, and the knowing looks they exchanged suggested they were thinking of more than just business. In May, Zachary asked her to ride out with him to a high meadow on the northern edge of his property. They packed a lunch and spent the day under the wide Arizona sky, and when the sun began its descent, painting the world in shades of amber and rose, he took both her hands in his. "I know it has not been a full year," he said. "I know that by some standards we should wait longer, be more proper. But I am 32 years old, Amelia, and I know my own mind. These months with you have been the best of my life. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you work beside me as a true partner. I cannot imagine my days without you in them." Amelia's heart was racing, but she kept her voice steady. "What are you saying, Zachary?" He smiled, that slow smile that transformed his weathered face. "I am saying that I love you, and I am asking if you would consider becoming my wife." She had known it was coming, had felt it building between them like a summer storm, but the words still struck her with the force of revelation. This was real. This was her life, her choice, her future. "Yes," she said, and then louder, laughing with pure joy, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the stolen, frightening advances she had endured before. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling so hard their faces hurt. They were married in early June in the small church in Wilcox, with Rosa and Marshall Redding standing as witnesses. Amelia wore a simple white dress that Rosa had helped her sew, and Zachary wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Amelia felt as though she were being born anew. All the pain of her past burned away in the light of this new beginning. The ranch became truly theirs, not just Zachary's property where she worked, but their shared home, their shared dream. They expanded the operation slowly, carefully, buying more breeding stock and improving the facilities. Amelia proved to have a sharp head for business, and within a year of their marriage, they had paid off the remaining mortgage and had money in the bank besides. But more than the financial success, it was the life they built that mattered. The quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch, the long days working side by side under the sun, The evenings when they would sit together and read or talk or simply exist in comfortable silence. The nights when he would hold her close and whisper that he loved her, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and she would whisper the same back, marveling that this was real, that this was hers. In the spring of 1885, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never thought much about children during her years of bondage. There had been no room for such dreams. But now, with Zachary's hand on her still flat stomach and his eyes bright with happiness, she let herself believe in this too. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are," she agreed, and the reality of it made her laugh with delight. The pregnancy was not easy. Arizona summers were brutal, and Amelia spent the hottest months moving slowly, doing what work she could while Rosa and Zachary hovered like anxious birds. But despite the discomfort, she was happy. She watched her body change, felt the baby grow and move within her, and marveled at the miracle of it all. In late October, after a long and difficult labor, Amelia gave birth to a son. They named him Daniel Thomas Kane, and Zachary cried when he held the baby for the first time, this hard, weathered cowboy reduced to tears by the sight of his tiny son. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this, but I thank God for it every day." Amelia, exhausted and sore and happier than she had ever been, smiled up at him. "We both deserve this. We fought for it and we earned it." Daniel was a colicky baby who did not sleep well, and those first months were a blur of exhaustion and overwhelming love. But they managed, taking turns walking the floor with the crying infant, supporting each other through the sleepless nights. Rosa helped immensely, her experience with her own children now decades past, but not forgotten. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Zachary's horses were in high demand, and they hired on 2 permanent hands to help with the increased workload. Amelia managed the accounts and handled much of the business correspondence, her natural intelligence finding expression in ways that would have been impossible during her years of servitude. In the evenings, after Daniel was in bed, she would sometimes take out the book of poems Zachary had given her that first Christmas. Many of the passages were marked now, lines that spoke to her, that captured something of what she felt but could not always articulate. One night, when Daniel was nearly 2 years old, Zachary found her reading and sat beside her on the sofa. "Read to me?" he asked. She selected a passage she loved, Whitman's words flowing in the lamplight. "I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness." "That one is about you," Zachary said when she finished. "How so?" "You did not know how much strength you had, how much capacity for joy and love and life. But it was always there, waiting for the chance to emerge." He took her hand. "I am so proud of who you are, Amelia, of everything you have become." "I could not have become any of this without you," she said. "We found each other," Zachary said. "That is what matters. We found each other, and we built something good." In the spring of 1887, Amelia gave birth to twin daughters, Emma Grace and Lily Rose. The pregnancy had been a surprise, and the discovery that it was twins had sent both Zachary and Rosa into a flurry of preparation. The birth was easier than Daniel's had been, perhaps because Amelia's body remembered what to do, or perhaps simply because she was stronger now, more confident in herself and her place in the world. With 3 small children, life became even more chaotic. But it was a good chaos, full of laughter and noise and the constant activity of growing young ones. Daniel was a serious child who loved the horses and followed his father around like a devoted shadow. Emma was bold and adventurous, already showing signs of the same fierce independence that had carried Amelia through her darkest days. Lily was gentler, thoughtful, with a gift for soothing upset animals and people alike. The ranch continued to grow. By 1890, they owned over 500 acres and had a reputation throughout the territory for producing quality horses. Zachary trained them not just for riding, but for specific purposes, cutting horses for ranches, cavalry mounts for the army, gentle animals for families. Amelia managed the business side, and together they made a formidable team. But success brought its own challenges. As their reputation grew, so did the attention they attracted. Twice, rustlers tried to steal their horses, and both times Zachary and the hands drove them off, though the second attempt resulted in one of the hands being shot in the shoulder. It was a reminder that the wildness of the West had not been entirely tamed, that danger still lurked in the spaces between civilization. Marshal Redding, who had become a close friend over the years, stopped by after the second incident. "You might want to think about hiring someone specifically for security," he said, sitting on the porch with Zachary while Amelia tended to the wounded hand inside. "Word is spreading that you have valuable stock here. That is going to keep attracting the wrong sort of attention." "I have been thinking the same thing," Zachary admitted. "Know anyone looking for that kind of work?" "Might," Redding said. "Let me ask around." Within a week, they had hired on a tough, older cowboy named Jack Morrison, who had spent 20 years as an Army scout and was looking for quieter work in his advancing age. Jack proved to be a perfect fit, with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, and the attempted thefts stopped after word spread that the Kane Ranch was now guarded by a man who had tracked Apaches across some of the most hostile terrain in the Southwest. Life settled into a new pattern. The children grew. Daniel, at 6, was already a skilled rider for his age. The twins, now 3, were handfuls who kept Amelia and Rosa constantly on their toes. Zachary's hair had started to show threads of silver at the temples, and Amelia, now 29, had grown into a confidence and self-possession that would have seemed impossible to the frightened girl who had collapsed beside a cattle trail 7 years before. One evening, after the children were in bed and the ranch was quiet, Amelia and Zachary took a walk to the creek, as they often did when they needed time alone together. "Do you ever think about that night?" Zachary asked. "When I found you?" "Sometimes," Amelia admitted. "Though it seems like it happened to someone else, someone I used to be." "You are still you," Zachary said. "Just more, happier, freer." "I am," she agreed. She stopped walking and turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "I never properly thanked you, you know, for everything, for saving me, yes, but more than that, for seeing me as a person, as someone worth saving, for burning that contract and taking on my problems as your own, for loving me when I did not know how to love myself." Zachary pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "You do not need to thank me for loving you. That is the easiest thing I have ever done." They stood like that for a long time, listening to the water and the night sounds, wrapped in each other and the peace they had built together. In 1892, Arizona was edging closer to statehood, and the territory was changing rapidly. The railroad had expanded, bringing more people and more commerce. Towns were growing, and the lawlessness that had characterized the early days was slowly giving way to a more settled society. Wilcox had doubled in size since Amelia's arrival, with a proper school, several churches, and even a small library. Amelia had become involved in the community in ways that still surprised her. She served on the school board, helped organize fundraisers for the library, and had become known as someone who could be counted on when help was needed. The respect she commanded was hard-won and deeply satisfying. She had also quietly helped several other young women escape situations similar to what she had endured. Word had spread, in the careful way such things do, that Amelia Kane would help if she could. A girl would show up at the ranch, or Amelia would hear, through Rosa's network of connections, and arrangements would be made. Sometimes it was as simple as providing a safe place to stay for a few nights, and money for a train ticket elsewhere. Other times, it required more elaborate planning. Zachary never questioned these activities, though he was fully aware of them. Instead, he supported them, offering his backing and occasionally his direct assistance when needed. It was, they both felt, a way of ensuring that what had happened to Amelia would happen to fewer others, a way of taking the pain of the past and transforming it into something meaningful. Marshall Redding helped too, looking the other way when needed and providing legal cover when situations got complicated. Between the three of them, they had helped more than a dozen women escape various forms of servitude and exploitation. And while it was quiet work that would never be recognized publicly, it was some of the most important either of them did. In the fall of 1893, a woman named Sarah Chin appeared at the ranch, brought by Rosa's niece from Tucson. Sarah had been working in a laundry under a contract similar to Amelia's, and like Amelia, she had decided that death was preferable to continued bondage. Amelia took her in without hesitation, gave her food and rest in safety, and after a week, when Sarah was stronger, helped her arrange passage to San Francisco, where she had family. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked the night before she left. "You do not know me." "Someone helped me once," Amelia said simply. "I am paying that forward." After Sarah left, Zachary found Amelia sitting on the porch, staring out at the darkening landscape. "You all right?" he asked, settling beside her. "I was just thinking about how different my life could have been," she said. "If you had not found me, if you had not been the man you are, I might have died out there on that trail, or been dragged back to the Hendersons, or any number of terrible things. Every good thing I have, every moment of happiness exists because you chose kindness over indifference." "We chose each other," Zachary said. "That is what I believe. Out of all the possible paths, all the moments that could have gone differently, somehow we found our way to each other. That is not just my kindness, Amelia. That is fate, or God, or whatever you want to call the force that brings people together when they need each other most." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that until the stars came out, brilliant and countless in the desert sky. By 1895, Daniel was 10 and already talking about the day when the ranch would be his. The twins were 7, both attending the school in Wilcox and proving to be bright students. Emma wanted to be a doctor, an ambition that was still shocking to many, but which Amelia encouraged fiercely. Lily wanted to be a teacher, which was more acceptable to society, but no less important. The ranch was thriving. They now employed 6 permanent hands plus Jack Morrison, and their horses were sold as far east as Kansas and as far west as California. Zachary had trained several of the hands in his methods, ensuring that the quality of their stock would remain high even as production increased. Amelia had taken over most of the business operations entirely, freeing Zachary to focus on the breeding and training that was his true passion. She discovered that she had a talent for negotiation and for reading people, skills that served her well in the increasingly competitive market for quality horses. In May of that year, on the 12th anniversary of the day Zachary had found her, they took a day away from the ranch to have a picnic at the high meadow where he had proposed. The children stayed with Rosa, and for one precious day, it was just the two of them, recapturing something of the early days of their courtship. 12 years, Zachary said, lying on his back in the grass with his hat over his face. Feels like both forever and no time at all. "I know what you mean," Amelia said. She was sitting beside him, her face turned toward the sun. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I get to wake up every morning next to you, that I have 3 beautiful children, that I am free to make my own choices and live my own life." "You made this life," Zachary said, lifting his hat to look at her. "I helped, but you made it. You had the courage to run, the strength to survive, the wisdom to build something good from the ashes of something terrible. I am just grateful I got to be part of it." She lay down beside him, their shoulders touching, and they stared up at the endless blue sky. "I love you," she said. "I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I have words for." "I love you too," he said, taking her hand. "Always have, always will." That night, when they returned to the ranch, Daniel met them at the door with his sisters right behind him. "Papa, Mama, come quick!" he said, his eyes bright with excitement. One of the mares is foaling, and Jack says it is going to be a special one. They followed their children to the barn, where, sure enough, one of their best mares was in the late stages of labor. Zachary moved to assist, his hands sure and gentle as he helped bring the foal into the world. It was a filly, perfectly formed, with a coat that would lighten to gray as she matured, and a white star on her forehead. She is beautiful, Emma breathed, reaching out tentatively to touch the wet, gangly newborn. She is yours, Zachary said, and Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Mine to train? Yours to train, Zachary confirmed. But you will do it right, the way I have taught you, with patience and respect. Emma nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the responsibility she had just been given. As Amelia watched her daughter with the foal, watched Zachary instructing her on how to approach the new life they had brought into the world, watched Lily and Daniel crowding close to see, she felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was her family. These were her people. This land, this ranch, this life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination. It was real, it was hers, and no one could ever take it away. The years continued to flow past, like the creek that marked their eastern boundary, constant and inevitable. By 1898, when Amelia turned 37 and Zachary 47, they had become elder statesmen of sorts in the ranching community. Younger ranchers sought out Zachary's advice on horse breeding and training, and Amelia's business acumen was legendary. They had weathered droughts and market fluctuations, had seen hands come and go, had buried Rosa when she passed peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1897 at the age of 73. Her loss hit them all hard. She had been more than hired help. She had been family, and the hole she left in their lives felt permanent. But they carried on because that was what Rosa would have wanted. They honored her memory by continuing to live well, by treating people with the respect and kindness she had exemplified. Daniel, now 13, was nearly as tall as his father and showed every sign of growing taller. He had Zachary's steady temperament and Amelia's head for business, and it was clear that the ranch would be in good hands when eventually passed to him. The twins at 11 were growing into remarkable young women. Emma had not given up on her dream of becoming a doctor and was already reading every medical text she could get her hands on. Lily had started teaching the younger children in Sunday school and talked about going to normal school to get her teaching certificate. Watching them grow, watching them become their own people with their own dreams and ambitions, filled Amelia with a pride and joy that sometimes overwhelmed her. These children who existed because she had survived, because she had chosen to keep living even when death seemed easier, they were her legacy, her triumph, her proof that good could rise from suffering. One evening in the late summer of 1899, Amelia was sitting on the porch when Zachary came out and handed her a letter. "This came today," he said. "Thought you would want to see it." She unfolded the paper and read. It was from Sarah Chen, the woman they had helped escape the laundry 6 years earlier. Sarah had made a life for herself in San Francisco, had married and had children, and was writing to thank Amelia again for the help that had made it all possible. "I think of you often," Sarah had written, "and I pray that your life is as full of joy as mine has become. You gave me a second chance, and I have tried to make the most of it. My children will grow up free, and they will never know what it is to be owned. That is your gift to me, and I will never forget it." Amelia folded the letter carefully, her eyes damp. "She is happy, because you helped her," Zachary said, "just like I helped you, just like we have helped others. It is a chain of kindness, Amelia, stretching backward and forward through time." "I want to do more," Amelia said suddenly. "I have been thinking about it. We have the resources now, the stability. What if we formalized what we have been doing? Created something official, a way for women in trouble to find help?" Zachary considered this. Like a charity. More than that, a refuge. A place where women could come, could learn skills, could be helped to start over. "We have the land. We could build something." The idea took root and grew. Over the next year, they established what they called the Cordova Foundation, named for Amelia's maiden name. They purchased a property on the edge of Wilcox and built a large house that could accommodate up to a dozen women at a time. They hired a widowed school teacher named Margaret Ellis to run the day-to-day operations and established partnerships with businesses in Wilcox and neighboring towns to provide training and employment opportunities for the women who came through. The foundation operated quietly, without fanfare, but word spread in the ways such things did. Women began to arrive, sent by churches, by sympathetic lawmen, by other women who had been helped. They came from all over the territory, fleeing contracts, abusive husbands, situations that had trapped them. They found safety at the foundation, found skills and confidence, and the tools they needed to build new lives. Amelia visited several times a week, talking with the women, helping where she could, sharing her own story when it seemed helpful. Many of the women could not believe that the composed, successful ranch owner before them had once been in circumstances similar to theirs. But the scars on Amelia's feet, which she would show them when needed, were proof that she understood, that she had walked the path they were walking. By 1902, the foundation had helped over 50 women, and Amelia and Zachary were quietly recognized throughout southern Arizona for their humanitarian work. It had not been without controversy. Some people, particularly those who benefited from various forms of exploited labor, grumbled about interference and troublemaking. But the Kanes had powerful friends, including the territorial governor, who had visited the ranch to purchase horses and had been impressed by both their operation and their charity work. Daniel, now 17, had taken over much of the daily ranch work, allowing Zachary to step back slightly and spend more time on the training and breeding that he loved most. The boy had proven himself capable and responsible, and Zachary spoke often of how proud he was of the man his son was becoming. The twins at 15 were both preparing for their futures. Emma had been accepted to a women's medical college in Pennsylvania, a fact that had shocked and delighted the family in equal measure. She would leave the following autumn, and while Amelia would miss her desperately, she was fiercely proud that her daughter had such opportunities. Lily had indeed enrolled in normal school and was excelling, with plans to return to Wilcox as a teacher once she completed her certification. One night, after a long day of work, Amelia and Zachary sat together on the porch, as they had done countless times over the years. "Did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Amelia asked. "That scared girl and the cowboy who found her, building all of this?" "I imagined that you would be remarkable," Zachary said. "I saw that in you from the first, even when you were half dead on the trail. But this?" He gestured broadly, encompassing the ranch, the life they had built, everything they had created. "This exceeds anything I could have imagined." "We did it together," Amelia said. "That is what matters. Every good thing we have built, we built together." Zachary took her hand, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles. His hands were more gnarled now, showing the wear of decades of hard work, but they were still strong, still capable of infinite gentleness. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. "Anything you wish had been different?" Amelia thought about it seriously. There had been pain, certainly, losses and struggles, and moments when the weight of the past threatened to crush her. But looking at the whole of her life, at the arc from bondage to freedom to this full, rich existence she now lived, she could find no room for regret. "No," she said finally, "I would not change anything, because if even one thing had been different, we might not be here now, might not have found each other. And that is worth any price." "I feel the same," Zachary said. He leaned over and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that spoke of decades of love and partnership. In 1903, Daniel married a young woman named Catherine Mills, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. It was a good match, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, and watching her son pledge his life to the woman he loved brought Amelia to tears. She remembered standing in the same church 20 years earlier, remembered the joy and hope and almost desperate gratitude she had felt. Now, seeing her son experience that same joy, she felt the circle close, felt the past and present merge into something whole and beautiful. Emma left for Pennsylvania in the autumn as planned, and her absence left a hole in the family that they all felt keenly. But she wrote often, long letters full of details about her studies, the city, the remarkable professors who were teaching her. Her letters were full of excitement and purpose, and Amelia treasured every one, storing them carefully in a wooden box Zachary had made for her. Lily completed her teaching certificate and returned to Wilcox, taking a position at the school where she had once been a student. She proved to be a gifted teacher, patient and creative, and she had a special gift for reaching students who struggled, who felt lost or overlooked. It was, Amelia thought, a perfect expression of who her daughter was. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel and Zachary's joint management. They had expanded into cattle as well, diversifying their operation to protect against market fluctuations. With Catherine's input, they also started a small garden operation, growing vegetables that they sold in Wilcox and the surrounding towns. The ranch that had once been Zachary's alone was now truly a family enterprise, with everyone contributing according to their strengths and interests. In the spring of 1905, Daniel and Catherine welcomed their first child, a boy they named Zachary Thomas Kane. Becoming grandparents transformed both Amelia and Zachary in ways neither had anticipated. The baby brought a new dimension to their lives, a continuation of the legacy they had built together. "He has your eyes," Amelia said to Zachary, holding the infant carefully. "And your stubbornness, if the way he screams when he is hungry is any indication," Zachary replied, but his voice was full of love and wonder. Little Zachary, as they called him to distinguish him from his grandfather, was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Margaret Rose, named for Margaret Ellis, who had run the foundation so capably for years. The ranch house, which had once seemed so spacious, was now full of life and noise and the beautiful chaos of multiple generations living and working together. By 1908, Amelia was 47 and Zachary 57. They had slowed down somewhat, letting the younger generation take on more of the physical work while they focused on planning and management. Zachary still spent hours each day with the horses, unable to fully step away from the work that had defined his life, but he no longer did the breaking and heavy training himself. Amelia continued her work with the foundation, which was now a permanent institution in Wilcox, respected and supported by the community. They had helped well over 100 women by this point, and the success stories were legion. Former residents of the foundation house had gone on to become teachers, nurses, business owners, wives, and mothers who were building their own families in freedom and dignity. One afternoon, Amelia was at the foundation when a young woman arrived, brought by Marshall Redding's successor. She was thin and frightened, with bruises on her arms and terror in her eyes. She was so young, perhaps 19, and Amelia saw herself in that fear, remembered what it felt like to believe there was no escape, no hope. "You are safe now," Amelia told her gently. "I know you do not believe that yet, but it is true. You are safe, and we are going to help you." The girl, whose name was Ruth, began to cry, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from her very soul. Amelia held her, this stranger, who was not a stranger at all, and let her weep out her fear and pain. "I was like you once," Amelia said when Ruth had quieted. "I ran from servitude, from people who believed they owned me. I thought I would die out there in the desert. But someone helped me, someone good and kind, who saw me as a person worth saving. And I built a life from that kindness, a good life, full of love and purpose. You can do the same. You can survive this, and you can thrive." Ruth looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. How? How do you move past it?" "One day at a time," Amelia said. "Some days are easier than others, but you keep moving forward, keep building, keep choosing life and hope over despair. And eventually you look back and realize that you are not the same person you were, that you have grown beyond what hurt you. Over the following weeks, Amelia watched Ruth begin to heal, begin to believe that safety and freedom were not just temporary illusions. She saw Ruth laugh for the first time, saw her make friends with the other women at the foundation, saw her start to learn skills that would serve her in building a new life. It was deeply satisfying work, this helping others find the freedom she had found. It felt like repaying a debt that could never fully be repaid, but that was worth every effort to try. In 1910, Emma returned from Pennsylvania with her medical degree, one of the first female doctors in Arizona Territory. She opened a practice in Wilcox, serving women and children primarily, and quickly became an invaluable part of the community. She also volunteered her services at the foundation, providing medical care for the women who came through and training some of them in basic nursing skills. Watching her daughter at work, seeing the competence and compassion Emma brought to her calling, filled Amelia with a pride that sometimes threatened to overflow. This brilliant, accomplished woman was her daughter, a living testament to what was possible when women were given the opportunity to pursue their dreams. Lily also continued to thrive, having married a kind-hearted rancher named Peter Sullivan. They had 2 children, both girls, and Lily continued to teach while raising her family. It was a balancing act that Amelia recognized from her own life, but Lily managed it with grace and determination. The Kane Ranch was now one of the most respected operations in southern Arizona. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Daniel was appointed to a territorial commission on agriculture, a recognition of his expertise and the family's standing in the community. Zachary, now 61, had mostly retired from active ranch work, though he still spent time with the horses and was a fixture at local horse sales and auctions. Amelia, at 51, remained deeply involved in both the ranch operations and the foundation. Her energy had not flagged, though she was more selective about how she spent it. She focused on the work that mattered most, the things that would outlast her and continue to make a difference. One evening in the summer of 1912, after a particularly long day, Amelia and Zachary took their customary walk to the creek. The path was familiar now, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. They walked hand in hand, moving more slowly than they once had, but still together, still in step. 29 years, Zachary said, since the day I found you. Best decision you ever made, stopping for that desperate woman on the trail, Amelia said with a smile. Definitely the best, Zachary agreed. Changed my whole life. Gave it meaning and purpose beyond just surviving, beyond just making money. You gave me a family, a real family, and a reason to want to make the world better. We gave that to each other, Amelia said. I would have died without you, literally or figuratively. You gave me back my life, my freedom, my ability to dream and hope and love. Everything good I have, everything I am, exists because you chose kindness that day. They sat by the creek, in the spot that had become theirs over the years. The water flowed past, constant and eternal, and the stars came out one by one, filling the desert sky with their ancient light. If you could go back, Zachary said thoughtfully, back to that girl who ran into the desert, what would you tell her? Amelia considered the question seriously. I would tell her that she is strong enough, that survival is possible, that there is a life waiting for her that is more beautiful than she can imagine. I would tell her about this moment, sitting by this creek with the man she will love for the rest of her life, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and a legacy of helping others. I would tell her that the pain will fade, but the joy will remain, that she will build something wonderful from the ashes of her suffering. And if you could go back to me, to the cowboy who found her, Zachary asked, I would tell you that stopping that day will be the best thing you ever do, that the woman you save will become your partner, your equal, your great love, that together you will build something that matters, something that will last long after you are gone. I would tell you to be brave, to burn that contract without hesitation, because what you will gain is worth any risk. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, hearts beating in rhythm after nearly 3 decades together. The life they had built together was not perfect. No life was, but it was theirs, earned and cherished and protected. It was real and solid and good. In 1915, the foundation celebrated its 15th anniversary with a gathering of women they had helped over the years. More than 60 former residents attended, bringing their families, their success stories, their gratitude. Amelia moved among them, listening to their stories, seeing the lives they had built, and felt a satisfaction deeper than anything she had ever known. These women, who had come to them broken and afraid, were now teachers and nurses, shopkeepers and ranchers' wives, mothers raising their own children in freedom. They were living proof that bondage did not have to be permanent, that with help and support and opportunity, people could transform their lives. At the end of the evening, Margaret Ellis called for quiet and presented Amelia with a beautiful quilt sewn by many of the former residents. Each square represented a different woman's story, a different journey from bondage to freedom. The center square featured an embroidered scene, a woman on horseback, held safely by a cowboy, riding toward the sunrise. For Amelia Kane, Margaret said, who showed us that freedom is possible, that kindness exists, and that our past does not have to define our future. Thank you for everything you have done and everything you continue to do. Amelia accepted the quilt with tears streaming down her face. Zachary stood beside her, his arm around her waist, his own eyes damp. This was their legacy, these women and their families, this chain of kindness stretching forward through time. That night they hung the quilt in the bedroom where they could see it every morning when they woke and every evening before they slept. It was a reminder of why they did what they did, of the difference that one person's kindness could make, of the ripples that spread outward from a single decision to help. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. Daniel and Catherine had 4 children eventually, creating a house full of energy and noise that reminded Amelia of her own children's youth. Emma established a thriving medical practice and never married, dedicating herself instead to her patients and her calling. Lily and Peter had 3 children total, all of whom showed signs of inheriting their mother's gift for teaching. In 1918, the Great War touched even their remote corner of Arizona. Daniel's oldest son, young Zachary, now 13, talked eagerly of enlisting when he was old enough. The thought terrified Amelia, this echo of violence reaching into her peaceful life. But the war ended before any of her grandchildren were old enough to serve, and she breathed easier knowing they would be spared that horror. By 1920, Zachary was 69 and Amelia 59. They had both slowed considerably, age making its presence known in aching joints and decreased energy. But their minds remained sharp, and they continued to be actively involved in both the ranch and the foundation, even if they had handed over most of the day-to-day operations to younger hands. They spent more time together now, just the 2 of them, reclaiming some of the quiet intimacy that had characterized their early years. Long talks on the porch, gentle walks to the creek, evenings reading together by lamplight. After nearly 4 decades of marriage, they knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance or a touch, were comfortable in the silences between words. "No regrets?" Zachary asked one evening, echoing a question from years before. "None," Amelia said firmly. "This life, this beautiful, impossible life we built together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that, Zachary. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," he said, as he always did. "That is what partnership means." In the spring of 1922, they traveled to San Francisco to visit Sarah Chen, the woman Amelia had helped escape the laundry nearly 30 years earlier. Sarah was now in her 50s, with grown children of her own, and a successful business importing Chinese goods. She welcomed them with tears and laughter, insisting they stay for 2 weeks, showing them the city, and introducing them to her family. "You changed my life," Sarah said one evening over dinner. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to understand. Without your help, I would have died in that laundry. or lived a half-life never knowing what I was capable of. Because of you, I built this. I am proud of what I have accomplished, and I am grateful every day for the chance you gave me. You did the hard work, Amelia said. I just opened a door. Sometimes opening the door is everything, Sarah replied. The trip home was long but satisfying. As they crossed back into Arizona, Amelia felt the rightness of returning to their land, their home. She loved traveling, loved seeing new places, but her heart belonged to the ranch, to the desert landscape that had been the backdrop for her transformation. They arrived home to find Daniel waiting with news. Another grandchild was on the way. This time, Emma, who at 40 had surprised everyone by announcing that she was expecting. She had met someone, another doctor, and though their relationship had been brief, Emma was determined to have and raise the child herself. It was scandalous in some circles, but the family rallied around her, and Amelia was simply grateful that her daughter would experience motherhood. Emma's son was born in the winter of 1923, a healthy boy she named Samuel. Watching her fierce, independent daughter with the infant, seeing the softness that motherhood brought out in her, moved Amelia profoundly. Life continued to surprise, to offer new joys even when it seemed all the chapters had been written. By 1925, Zachary's health had begun to fail. It was nothing dramatic, just a slow diminishment, a gradual withdrawing of the energy that had sustained him for 74 years. He tired more easily, moved more slowly, spent more time resting, but his mind remained clear and his love for Amelia never wavered. They spent those years in quiet contentment, surrounded by family, watching grandchildren and great-grandchildren grow. The ranch thrived under Daniel's management, and the foundation continued its work under new leadership. Everything they had built was solid, would outlast them, and there was deep satisfaction in that knowledge. One evening in the late summer of 1926, Zachary did not come in for dinner. Amelia found him by the creek, their creek, sitting in their spot with his hat in his lap and a peaceful expression on his face. He had passed quietly, probably hadn't suffered at all, had simply sat down in the place he loved most and let go. The grief was profound, but not bitter. They had had 43 years together, had built a life and a legacy that mattered. She held his cooling hand and wept, but through the tears there was gratitude. Gratitude for every day, every moment, every shared sunrise and whispered conversation. He had been her savior, her partner, her great love, and nothing could diminish what they had shared. His funeral drew people from across the state. Former foundation residents came to pay their respects. Ranchers he had helped over the years, business associates, friends. The church in Wilcox could not hold everyone, and the service spilled out onto the street. Amelia stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren, by the visible proof of the life she and Zachary had built, and though her heart ached with loss, it was also full of love, full of memories, full of the certainty that what they had created together would endure. In the years after Zachary's death, Amelia continued to work with the foundation, though she moved more slowly now, tired more easily. She was 65, and the years of hard work and heartbreak had left their mark, but she was not done yet. There was still more to do, more women to help, more good to put into the world. She wrote a memoir at Emma's insistence, detailing her journey from servitude to freedom, from desperation to joy. It was published in 1928 and became quietly influential, read by women across the country who saw their own struggles reflected in her words. She received hundreds of letters, and though she could not respond to all of them, she read every one, drawing strength from the knowledge that her story gave hope to others. In 1930, at the age of 69, Amelia Cordova Kane stood at the dedication of a new building for the foundation, a proper shelter with room for 30 women, with classrooms and a medical clinic staffed by Emma and her colleagues. The building bore a plaque, the Zachary Kane House, dedicated to the memory of a man who believed in kindness, in freedom, and in the infinite potential of every person. Amelia ran her fingers over the plaque, over her husband's name rendered in bronze and smiled through her tears. "We did it," she whispered to the memory of the cowboy who had saved her life. "We built something good, something that will last. Thank you, my love. Thank you for everything." She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, watched over by her children and grandchildren. Emma moved back to the ranch to care for her in those final years, and they spent long afternoons talking, sharing stories, strengthening the bond between mother and daughter that had always been strong. On a warm spring morning in 1935, Amelia Cordova Kane passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 74. She was buried beside Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, and her funeral was even larger than his had been. The foundation closed for the day, and every woman who could make the journey came to pay their respects to the woman who had saved them. Her children and grandchildren stood together, 3 generations of Kanes, and looked out over the land their parents had built together. The ranch stretched to the horizon, prosperous and thriving. The foundation building stood proud in the distance. The legacy was secure. And somewhere, perhaps, in the space between memory and eternity, a young woman collapsed on a desert trail, and a cowboy stopped to help her. And the whole beautiful, impossible story began again, endless as the stars, eternal as love itself.